All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Whenever we think about supply chains, our minds usually go straight to those massive cargo ships crossing the ocean, or maybe those super advanced robots zipping around warehouse floors. But it turns out there is this totally hidden, high-stakes transition zone that gets completely overlooked. It's the space sitting right between the highway and the warehouse door, the logistics yard. And today, we're going to figure out why getting absolute control over this exact patch of asphalt is no longer just some operational afterthought. It is an absolute bottom line necessity.
To really wrap our heads around why this matters so much, think about it like this. A truck that waits at the gate is never just waiting. I know it sounds super simple, right? But a delayed truck blocks a lane, which frustrates the carriers and quietly pushes your entire meticulously planned warehouse schedule completely off balance, often before lunch even hits. It's a localized problem that instantly transforms into a systemic one. Because across a busy logistics site, that one tiny delay, it repeats dozens of times a day, basically turning the outside logistics area from a simple parking lot into this critical, massive bottleneck.
And here is the real core tension of the whole thing. The yard is the exact physical handover point where two totally different worlds just crash into each other. You've got the transport teams out on the road, and they're entirely focused on routes, shipments, and hitting these incredibly tight delivery windows. Meanwhile, the warehouse teams inside the building are laser-focused on inventory levels, labor scheduling, and dock capacity. The yard is where those two fundamentally different mindsets collide. Picture a food distribution center near Rotterdam, for example. Fresh goods arrive early, store replenishment leaves later. If just one single inbound trailer gets delayed out in the yard, it immediately jeopardizes the cold chain handling, the picking plans, and ultimately those outbound customer delivery promises. It's a domino effect.
Now, Eurostat recently put out some numbers for 2024, and the trend is honestly wild. While maritime transport still takes the lion's share at 67%, though that's actually decreasing, road freight has grown to account for 25.7% of freight transport performance within the EU. In fact, if you look at the past 10 years, road freight was literally the only mode of transport with a growing share. What does this tell us? It proves that European logistics, and really global supply chains by extension, are getting more and more dependent on flawlessly managing these exact truck flows. We simply cannot afford inefficiencies at the gates anymore.
So, to prevent total chaos, sites rely on logistics yard management to orchestrate this transition zone and keep operational visibility crystal clear. In practical terms, it covers everything from truck arrivals and gate access to parking, tracking trailers, and figuring out dock allocation. But really, it boils down to answering three super basic fundamental questions at any given second. Who is on site, where should they go, and what happens next? Honestly, if a facility manager cannot answer those three questions instantly, they're operating with a massive blind spot.
And operating with a blind spot creates what we call the ripple effect of yard delays. Because an inefficient site doesn't just stay a local problem, the friction bleeds out everywhere. A single misplaced trailer hanging out in a yard can actually delay an entire production line inside a manufacturing plant. Or, one blocked lane at the front gate can cause half a dozen different carriers stacked up behind them to miss their next appointments clear across town.
It essentially creates an escalation chain. It's so interesting to map out how these tiny things snowball. Let's say a driver is rushed, so they end up parking in the wrong lane. Boom! Suddenly, the dock team is hunting around for missing paperwork for that specific load. Then, security has to get on the radio to operations to figure out what's going on. Operations is frantically calling the warehouse. The warehouse is trying to call transport back. It's a mess. A simple wait at the gate triggers this massive chain reaction of misplaced trailers, lost documents, and just pure panic across every single department.
And the crazy part here, nobody is actually being lazy. The people working the gates, driving the yard trucks, unloading the pallets, they are working incredibly hard. The process is just so heavily fragmented that a single blocked lane literally destroys a meticulously planned schedule. When one slow gate forces everybody to just abandon the plan, the whole operation shifts from controlled, precise execution into total improvisation. And let me tell you, improvisation in the logistics world is incredibly expensive.
So, if we want to fix this fragmentation, we have to zoom in for a second and ask, what is actually happening inside a logistics yard? What does the journey look like on the ground before a pallet ever even crosses the dock line? Let's break down the actual day-to-day workflow.
If we follow a truck from the highway all the way to the dock, there's a pretty strict chronological 4-step workflow that has to happen for every single delivery. Step 1, arrival and check-in at the gate, which, surprise, is often the very first bottleneck. Step 2 is yard allocation. This is where the vehicle is told to go to a waiting zone, a staging lane, or maybe an inspection area.
Step 3 is the actual dock handling, where the loading or unloading happens based on whatever the priority is. And finally, Step 4 is departure and checkout, where you record the exact time and finalize the paperwork as the truck rolls out. Now, explaining that workflow takes about 10 seconds, but running it consistently every single day, incredibly hard.
Because without modern technology, where do the common bottlenecks actually happen? Well, everywhere. Those 4 simple steps are absolutely riddled with these repeating, time-draining frictions. Most of the time, yard management issues aren't these massive, dramatic disasters. They're literally 1,000 tiny cuts. It's a few minutes lost here, a few minutes lost there, and before you know it, your efficiency is completely eroded. And the biggest culprit behind all of these little cuts? It's the sheer noise of manual processes. Security, transport, and the warehouse teams are all trying to communicate, but they're using totally disjointed tools. We're talking endless email chains, unanswered phone calls, conflicting radio chatter, and outdated manual spreadsheets. Get this, some yards are genuinely still relying on memory-based trailer tracking, which, okay, might be fine for a quiet Tuesday morning, but during peak volume, it's an absolute recipe for disaster. It creates chaotic noise and means different teams have completely different versions of the truth. If one digit gets typed incorrectly, or someone moves a trailer but forgets to update the shared spreadsheet, the team burns valuable time chasing down a completely preventable error.
Ultimately, all of this communication breakdown leads directly to a massive physical traffic jam. When you don't separate your inbound peaks and you don't properly reserve capacity, what happens? Way too many trucks arrive in one single time window, and way too few docks are actually ready to receive them. So the drivers are just left sitting in their cabs, staring at the steering wheel, waiting. And keeping drivers waiting is a massively expensive problem to have. To put this into perspective, the IRU reports that by 2025, there are going to be 3.6 million unfilled truck driver positions globally. 3.6 million. So wasting a scarce driver's hours making them sit in a disorganized yard is an incredibly costly mistake, and it leads straight to rising detention and demurrage costs.
So, how do we get out of this mess? How do we transform this chaotic, stressful blind spot into a well-oiled machine? Well, when manual processes, spreadsheets, and relying on someone's memory just can't handle the sheer truck volume or appointment complexity anymore, facilities have to turn to technology. Enter the Yard Management System, or YMS. A YMS basically flips the script entirely. Instead of frequent waiting and tedious manual logs, carriers are pre-registered. Gates become these automated checkpoints using QR codes or license plate recognition. Instead of having a team out there frantically searching the lot for a misplaced trailer, you have real-time trailer tracking. You literally know exactly where everything is, instantly. And instead of multi-site inconsistency, every single action feeds into centralized event recording and analytics.
But here's the thing. Implementing this kind of practical technology and sharing data isn't just about moving trucks a little bit faster. It is fundamentally about reclaiming control. Live data flips your site from being constantly reactive to being calmly controlled. Teams can actually see which vehicles are on site, which docks are active, and exactly where delays are starting to build up. Decision-making becomes so much faster and honestly, a lot less emotional.
Because when a YMS connects the gate, the dock, and the driver, the benefits are genuinely transformational. You get faster turnarounds, way less congestion, and massive quiet cost savings. I actually love that term from the source material, quiet savings. A YMS is all about 10 minutes saved over here, one frantic phone call avoided over there, and a missed delivery slot completely prevented. Improved visibility means transport sees the real-time status, warehouse teams know the exact priorities, security knows exactly who is on the property, and management finally gets to see real, actionable performance metrics.
Now, obviously, any location with regular truck traffic is going to benefit from this, but certain operations definitely feel the pressure a lot sooner than others. High-volume distribution centers, manufacturers protecting complex production lines, and heavy-duty 3PLs absolutely require this kind of digitized control just to survive their peak volumes. Large retail or grocery DCs, they live and die by precise rhythm. For factories, that external logistics yard is literally the shield protecting their internal assembly lines. And for 3PLs juggling a bunch of different clients, they need transparent reporting to actually prove the quality of their service.
When you modernize access, safety, and communication like this, the busiest physical handover in the whole supply chain undergoes a complete identity shift. There's this incredible quote from the source material that hits the nail right on the head. This site stops being a blind spot. It becomes a performance lever. It's so true. When trucks arrive with clear appointments, when drivers get simple instructions in their own language, and when docks are coordinated without a bunch of radio static, the entire operation just breathes easier. Which leaves us with a pretty critical question to evaluate the true visibility of your own operations. Is your logistics yard still a costly, chaotic blind spot that's quietly draining your resources? Or are you ready to turn it into a strategic performance lever? Something to chew on. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and we will see you in the next one.